Down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2021. Wow, 2021. Brand new year, brand new, well, not a brand new setup, but this is episode number 35 of the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and I am your incredibly handsome New Year's host, Rick. You know, sitting and thinking back of all of 2020 and everything that it brings, you know, and I'll cover some of what happens or what has happened in the year. Kind of a review, I guess you could say, but from my perspective, 2020 was pretty messed up. Okay, let's be completely honest. 2020 was pretty messed up. I mean, we've got, and what's sad about that though is that 2021 is starting out with a bit of a bang, sort of. I mean, at least if you are interested in U.S. history, you absolutely cannot deny that this year is going to be a banner year. But I do want to point out that we are into 2021, and I want to give everybody a round of applause for surviving 2020. That's right. Surviving 2020. I mean, let's be honest here, because we're dealing with a situation. I mean, you know, hindsight is supposed to be 2020, and I got to tell you, if this is our hindsight looking back, 2020 definitely was kind of screwed up. I mean, we had a pretty good start to the year, at least from my perspective. You know, it started fairly well, and January and February was pretty good, but then we hit February, and February took off. February, March, April, we brought this potentially completely devastating virus. We didn't know what to expect. Nobody knew what was going on. We ended up, you know, locking things down, shutting things down. And I am definitely right there in saying that, you know, doing so at the time, I think was a prudent response. It was definitely prudent from that standpoint. You know, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what was going on. This was a brand new novel virus. And 2020 moved on, and we kind of went through, and we had a very, very odd year in terms of not just travel and all of the new restrictions and masks and mask wearing and talk of a vaccine. And we had the one of probably the most contentious election cycles, at least in recent history. I mean, as far back as I can remember. I mean, I know there was the Bush v. Gore thing, but, you know, realistically, that kind of pales in comparison to what we experienced with this one. I mean, we had one gentleman who would not shut down anything. He was having his, you know, rallies and get-togethers and so on and so forth. And then we had another gentleman who spent almost the entire election cycle in his basement doing video calls, video chats, video displays, whatever you want to call it. You know, I have a hard time with a few things we had, and you know, I have a hard time believing a few things that are going on right now that are going to carry us into the next year, that are starting as of right now, right today. I have suffered a personal loss late last year, right before Christmas. I lost my stepfather. And unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, they think of a stepfather as kind of a person who is outside of the family. But to be honest with you, my mom and dad got divorced fairly early in my life. And in doing so, I ended up with this gentleman, and I'm not going to speak necessarily specifically toward him, but it definitely, having someone come into your life like that and understand that they have to take on the responsibilities that literally they didn't really have much to contribute, other than maybe, some monetary value after the fact. But being a step parent is kind of a tough job. I mean, you've got a big hole to fill, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a big hole to fill in the fact that the individual that you are taking over for is so grand and so, stupendous that you have like a superhero image that you have to fill. In some cases, that's not always the case. In some cases it is. And the reality is that, from my experience, he stepped into it, and granted, he made mistakes. I'm not going to deny that he made mistakes. I made them too when I was growing up, and there were times when we were at odds with each other. But the reality of it is that he was there for a good part of my life. And a lot of what I've learned growing up, and a lot of what I stood for growing today, a lot of what I stand for today comes from at least some of his influence. And it also comes from, my mother's influence too, because she was definitely a part of my life. And I appreciate that. I appreciate her. I appreciate everything that she did, and everything, believe it or not, that he did. I mean, even some of the negative things that occurred when I was growing up was enough to kick me in the pants to make the choice to either not repeat that, or if it was something that I really thought was right and true and everything else, I took it as a part of me. And you can ask my wife, there are things that I do, unfortunately good and bad, that are based off of influence that he had in my life. And having that kind of, just the fact that he was there in comparison to what potentially was my first several years of life without my biological father in my life is, it's an incredible thing. I mean, we tend to think of families, and we tend to think of things like, step parents and parents as being these immortal beings, and the ones that you see on TV that have all of the answers, and they're all perfect, and everything is like a TV show or a movie, and the parent has the answer, the right answer for what they whatever situation that you're in. And the reality of it is that we don't come with instruction manuals. And I honestly did not find that out until I became a parent myself. And I became a parent, and there is no instruction manual. There is nothing that tells you the perfect thing to say or do in every single situation. And everybody's situation is different. Everybody's experience is different. So the only thing that you can do realistically as a parent or a step parent is to pass along things that you feel are important to that young person in your life. And basically, in memoriam toward him, he did the best that he could with what he had. And toward the end there, he did give me a phone call and tell me some things that honestly, as I was growing up, I probably could have heard more of, but the reality was that he was not that kind of a man. He was not that kind of an individual, and to expect that of him was sort of selfish on my part, because that was something that I needed. Now, granted, I didn't necessarily reach out to him because, again, that's not something that I am, that I do. But for the most part, I mean, yeah, again, there were mistakes, but for the most part, I believe that he did the best that he could. And I responded in ways that I think were appropriate at the time. Nothing is perfect, and I am sad that he is gone. But at the same time, knowing the last several months of his life, if not the last couple of years, have been tough on both him and my mom, just because of his health and how things are fading. And so, I appreciate everything that he did. I don't know if he ever really knew that. But to be honest with you, it doesn't even make a difference now. The only thing that I can say is that as of this moment, I need to make a change in the way that I interact with my own children so that they understand and they see and they know how I feel about them moving forward. I think that's probably the best way that I could honor him and honor his memory, is to do things my way with his influence, but to ensure that some of the things that he made mistakes on, I don't repeat those mistakes. I try very hard, I think, to not make those same mistakes, but sometimes it's going to happen. Sometimes things are just going to get out of hand or whatever, and those mistakes are going to be made. Fortunately, I still have my mother. She is a very strong woman. I am very appreciative of her, and we're going to be spending the next few months, obviously, taking care of affairs as necessary. But anyway, so that was kind of a Debbie Downer for the end of the year, was his loss, or the loss of him, not his loss, but the loss of him. Other than that, though, I mean, we've had kind of an interesting year. We've had things like stimulus checks. We've had situations that we have never encountered before here in the U.S. when it comes to things like shutdowns and masking and protocols and things like that. And it's been a really, really nasty year when it comes to stuff like that. And thankfully, 2020 is over. Hopefully, 2021 moving forward is going to be the better of the 2 years, and the better we always have to look forward. We always have to look forward towards hope. We've got things like the vaccine now, and you can say one thing or another about the vaccine. It is entirely personal choice, as far as that goes, until such time that it does not become personal choice. I personally, as an American, don't feel that we should get to that point, but you never know. I mean, it might end up coming to that. There is several communications back and forth about the virus and that type of stuff. I'm not going to necessarily go into that. I have my stance. You have your stance, and we'll just go from there. I do not deny that it is here. I don't deny that it attacks certain people, and that things, are positive or negative about it. I think that there are, as with anything, there are truths out there, but I also think that there are some misinformation that is out there as well. We've had a banner year to figure out that, hey, you know what? Not everybody is on the up and up. And I mean to say it could be anything from news media outlets to individual news sources to companies like Twitter and Facebook and Google. How we are reacting to things these days. I mean, seriously, we have a huge problem here an apparent problem. I'm not saying it's 100% certain, but there are apparent problems with some of the services that we are used to using. And it is a very interesting situation when you have what is supposed to be a platform to be able to communicate and gather and talk to people, and we come to find out that there is a possibility that they are doing things, nefarious things in the background to silence one of our greatest rights as Americans, which is free speech. Now, we talk about free speech and we talk about this, but there is a fine line and a fine difference between free speech and speech on somebody else's platform, behalf, whatever. I mean, you can't walk onto an airplane. Contrary to popular belief, you cannot walk onto an airplane with something written on your shirt that is offensive, because even though you are on an airplane, it is not considered public transportation. And even though you have paid for that ticket, it is not considered a right necessarily to be on that airplane, because you are paying for a service by a private company, and that private company can choose to deny you service. Now, this kind of is contrary to beliefs, but you could apply it to things like Facebook. I mean, Facebook is free. YouTube, for the most part, is free unless you're paying for that service. And they are providing you that service for something that, could constitute free speech, but do they have the right to censor? It's a tough road to hoe. It is a really tough road to hoe. And this is where we're at in terms of today's society. We have, last year, we had the first time, I think, that we've ever seen this, at least in my lifetime, where we had the government handing out stimulus checks. And these stimulus checks were put together to help supposedly stimulate the economy, get the economy moving, helping people get their lives together. But that, is something that's brand new. Now, here's an interesting thing to think about, is that the government by itself does not create anything. In fact, the way that the government tax system works is that it has to take from one person and be able to give to another. So all of these special programs and everything else that we have, where we have things like Medicare, Medicaid, even Social Security is a bit of a difference in the fact that people pay into it, and it's supposed to be, although it hasn't turned out to be, but it is supposed to be kind of like a bank account, to where you pay into it and you're supposed to be able to get benefits out. We've had that change in the last 10 years. And it's especially shown up here now. So we're sitting here and we're thinking that we're getting this stimulus check and we're getting something from the government. We're actually, all we're doing is we're just getting a loan on our own money that we've already put in. And yet we are believing that the government is actually helping us. Well, this next round of stimulus checks that are starting to come out, they're $600 a piece. Now, is that a lot of money? Maybe, but realistically, we're starting to see some things that aren't adding up, and that's what 2020 has brought to us. And that's where I think 2020, in terms of the vision, has brought to us. We've seen conglomerates, we've seen papers, we've seen, again, the tech giants and some of their censoring. We're starting to see things that we never would have seen before had 2020 not shown up. We're seeing doctors that are supposed to be revered and for their knowledge and their attachment to science, who have flip-flop back and forth on their choosing, based on whatever they feel like for the day. We've seen politicians who claim that they are for the people, yet we've seen that some of them are not. And the corruption, oh my gosh, look at the elections. Even just the idea, the mere idea that it is possible to steal an election is something that nobody really thought of in a grandiose way until 2020. So maybe 2020 is the year of the vision, the year of hindsight, the clarity that we are going to get in the vision. Now, if that's 2020, then what is 2021? That is a question that I think we're all going to have to answer, is what is 2021? Because we're starting to see things like businesses being shut down. And those businesses that have shut down, that have closed and shuttered their doors forever due to the pandemic, because they just cannot sustain not bringing in revenue and still doling out expenses, we're starting to see something that I don't think that anybody has really looked at. And honestly, you, as someone who is living through this, like the people who lived through the Depression in the past, we need to change our way of thinking. We need to start changing the way that we live our lives to where we have ways to ensure that we are able to take care of our families. A lot of people, there's been, several conversations about this. A lot of people have believed, or have maybe not believed, but have been proven to see that they are living from paycheck to paycheck. You can't do that anymore. You have to change. And I think this is where 2020 really has shown us something. We have to change the way that we approach things. We can't just overextend credit. We can't live from paycheck to paycheck. Maybe there's a change that you can make starting in 2021 that'll help solidify your existence moving forward. Maybe there's something that you need to do to make a difference in your life, to make it so that you and your family are better protected. I don't know, maybe start a garden so that you have food to be able to supplement what you're getting from the store. Potentially start a new venture. Start something that maybe is a little more recession proof. Like I was telling my son, who graduated last year from high school and has started on his business, moving on to becoming an adult. Take a look around and see the types of careers and job opportunities that are still available today, even though several things have shut down. Maybe that's a change that needs to happen within you. Maybe you go and get some different training or something. Let's look toward 2021 as a year of hope after what we've just lived through. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, that we have a historical opportunity occurring right now in terms of the election cycle. Now, for everyone who's grown up without studying the Constitution, you can look at the Constitution today and you can actually start reading how we handle things like having dueling slates of electors and issues with the voting process. And what you are seeing today, right now, is a history in the making. It is an incredible, even though it's frustrating at times, and even though you're looking at it and going, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is happening. What are we going to do? And you have some, uncertainty and despair, like in the pit of your stomach kind of thing. You can also look at this as this is an incredible opportunity to look at a very, very limited situation that doesn't come up very often. It's happened a couple different times. I believe it was in the election of 1890 it occurred. And, of course, the Bush v. Gore situation in 98, 94, something like that. I can't remember my dates exactly. But if you look at how these things play out, you'll get a better understanding of how our election process is supposed to work. Now, January 6th, which all of the news media is talking about, is a very key date because it is when the Congress gets back together for the new year and goes through and counts the electoral votes for the president. Now, depending upon which guy you're following, you're hoping, you're either hoping that the Electoral College is going to go through and do its thing and Biden and Harris are going to get in, or you're looking at it and you're saying, oh my gosh, is there a way to prove that this election was stolen from us, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not an expert by any means in terms of what's going on in the legal battles or anything else, but I think there is enough evidence out there that it definitely warrants a look. And the sad part about it is that our legal system has denied some of this. Now, a lot of people look at the legal system and they say, hey, you know what? The legal system, every time a judge passes on a case, it's due to the fact that there is no election fraud. Well, you got to look at the reasons why they passed on it. And most of, if not a predominance of all of the cases that have been thrown out, they've been thrown out on procedural issues. And we haven't really seen, in a legal sense, we haven't really seen the evidence that a lot of these people are claiming. Now, somebody says evidence. What is evidence? Well, pretty simply, evidence is not only hard proof from looking at a procedural standpoint of like the IT departments examining the voting machines and examining the source code and that kind of stuff, which has been done in at least one state. And there have been some anomalies that have been identified. But again, that's just one evaluation. You also have things like affidavits from people who basically swear under oath that what they are saying is true and correct. And you've got several people who have done that where there has been some funky irregularities. So you can't sit here and say that looking at this, that there isn't evidence of it. It's just whether or not the preponderance of the evidence is actually going to be enough to sway the outcome. Now, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have my thoughts. I have my doubts. I have what I would like to see happen. But regardless, if you set that aside and you look at this, this is an incredible testament to look at a small, very, very minimally used part of the Constitution, and it is playing out in real life right in front of us. So looking at this from a standpoint of a learning experience and an understanding of our electoral processes here in the U.S., this is a great test subject to see what's going on. Now, there have been some wrangling back and forth, and the fact of the matter is that on January 6th, in order for this to work, and this is my understanding of it, so, I could be entirely wrong, but in order for things to go bad, you have to have at least one senator and at least one representative from the House to object to the state's electors that are coming in. And up until this past couple of days, we have had no senators that wanted to, but now all of a sudden we have a group of 11 senators that are stepping forward, and we have an individual senator from before that that are going to stand up. Now, we've already heard about the House of Representatives. Those people, they've had several people that have all said this. So now what you have is you have a slate who, if they follow through on January 6th to object to the electors coming in, you will have a situation where they cannot continue as both houses put together. They have to separate. They have to vote individually. By individually, I mean the Senate votes individually and the House of Representatives votes individually on whether or not to support these objections. Now, if both houses unanimously agree to support these objections, then there is going to be discussion and debate about what to do. Because regardless of how anybody thinks, the state legislatures and the Congress are the only ones constitutionally written to support these elections. So this entire situation, everything going on, all of the legal challenges, all of the legal battles, everything that has happened up until this point has all been realistically, smoke screens, other than possibly bringing out the evidence to show that something happened in terms of the nefariousness of the elections itself. Now, after that happens, we get into some gray area territory. It really depends on what occurs during that time. And I think that, January 6th, between January 6th and the only date that is actually in the Constitution is January 20th for the inauguration of the incoming administration, no matter which one it happens to be. So whatever happens is going to happen fairly quickly in order for this to continue. Now, in the 1890s, when they had a problem, they actually didn't end up crowning a president until March. So there is precedent there to carry this through multiple months per se. And there's some question as to how that's going to happen. I don't want to leave you with total despair. What I'm trying to tell you is our Constitution was put together by some very intelligent people, and they've worked on it and they put it together. And it is an incredible document that we need to follow. We need to take a look at, and we need to follow it to the letter that it was written, because I think the processes are there. Now, it's a little ambiguous, I'll agree, but at the same time, let's just let the process go. So that's 2020. We saw a very heated and contested election. And we saw an individual who defied all of the odds. He's defied a lot of odds to get where he is, to be at least the potential president-elect. I mean, the guy didn't really campaign. He didn't win what was considered the bellwether states. So we have some challenges there. We have some things that normally don't happen. And now things have changed, and all of a sudden what we accepted as the norm is no longer the norm. The same thing with the virus. What we've accepted as the norm is no longer the norm. Being able to go out to restaurants and eat in restaurants and that kind of stuff, that's no longer the norm because of the changes that have happened. So 2020 has been a banner year for changes and differences. And outside of the people who have been lost due to whatever reasons, whether it is actual COVID or whether it was due to complications from elsewhere, all I can tell you is that we had a horrible year, but let's look forward to 2021 and let's look forward to what we have in terms of potential. You can make changes for yourself. You can make changes in your life. You can choose to wallow in whatever 2020 brought you, or you can take that as, you know what? I took some hits. I took some blows. I'm not going to deny it, but I'm still here and I'm still kicking and I'm able to move on. And moving on, let's think about resolutions for a second. Resolutions. Now, I personally, I don't necessarily prescribe to resolutions, because I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not very good at keeping them. I mean, in the past, I've made a resolution to lose weight. The first couple months, I go at it gung-ho, and then pretty soon it kind of lays off to the wayside, and next thing you know, it's no longer important to me anymore. Goal setting, I think, is more important than making a resolution on it. But at the same time, though, you could conceivably say that resolutions are goal setting. My challenge with that, though, is that resolutions are so hard set. They are so hard set. We need to be able to forgive ourselves, and that's what the goal setting is for. So if you think about the language in which you're using, if you're setting a goal, that means when you have a setback, it's not as important that you had the setback, other than the fact that you continue on to that goal. You move on to that goal. And continuing is what you should be focused on, is moving on toward the goal, moving on to the next level. And so, being able to sit here and say, yeah, I did a New Year's resolution. I mean, I don't know very many people that have been able to keep them. But if you say, I've set a goal for this year, then that's a little different, because if you don't quite make the goal, at least you've made progress toward that goal. At least you've made progress moving forward toward that goal. And that is more important, I think, than having a resolution and attaining it. A very wise man once said, the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And I think a lot of times when we set a New Year's resolution, we're setting it up to be a huge elephant to us. I mean, most of the time people go and they put these big, humongous stressors on our lives to go and do this resolution. And, I've got a New Year's resolution to lose weight. I've got a New Year's resolution to get in shape. But the thing that makes the most sense is to go and rather look at the big thing at the end, work your way toward it in small steps so that you get to the next level, so that you get to the next place. And you know what? If you say, I want to be down to 185 or I want to be down to 165 or, who the heck knows what your ideal weight is. If you look at that and you say, you know what? I just want to lose weight, and you end the year. So you make that goal. I just want to lose weight, and you end the year with a lighter scale than what you entered the year with, then that is a success. And that's the piece that needs to be there. And that's the positive outlook that we need to have in moving forward. We just keep moving forward. And if you get pushed back a couple of steps, who cares? Move forward. Continue on the path to go to the next level, to go to the next step in the evolution. Not the resolution, but the evolution of you and your life. And the same thing goes with anything. I mean, it could be training. It could be, it could be getting a new job. It could be whatever you want. Now, understandably, we have, a bunch of challenges that we are faced with. And one of them being the fact that we have things that are not in our control. And being able to work around some of those things that aren't part of our control is what makes us great in terms of our ability to adapt and overcome the situation that we have in front of us. And it's that resolve, that fortitude that we have that makes it to where we move through the challenges and the obstacles that we have in front of us. Challenges and obstacles could be something as simple as putting up better Christmas lights for next year. Thanks for that. Putting up better Christmas lights for next year. And you know what? I have a couple of things that I'm doing as well. And I am going to move forward with these things. That's the importance of being able to take the next step to move forward. Again, not resolutions. Don't do a resolution, because if you do a resolution, just having a resolution kind of is like, hey, if I don't make it, I fail. It's going to be horrible. I mean, they seem kind of finite. So let's talk about moving goals. Let's put out goals and let's take small goals. And then what you can do is you know what? You know what you can do, though? If you really want to think about it this way, think about this. Have the resolution, but have that as the end game, the very end thing that you're going for. And then set up smaller goals in front of it such that those smaller goals are your progress. And when you step forward and you step into that first goal, you're going to go, hey, this is cool. And then you're going to move on to the next goal, and then the next goal, and the next goal. And then next thing you know, you're at your final point that you wanted. That resolution has finally come true. So push yourself to get there. But let's get there in a positive way. Let's get there positive motion, forward motion. That's what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone line in case anybody wants to call and talk about the year in review, resolutions, everything that I've kind of mentioned. And resolving to put up better Christmas lights. I like that idea. I do. We definitely need to focus on that, I think. But resolutions, looking forward to 2020, it's always a brand new year is always it's a new beginning. It's you have new challenges. You have new ways and new things to look forward to. Yes, 2020 was horrible, but let's put that up aside. Put that on the back burner. Let's look at today. It's history. It's hindsight. It's in the past. Let's look toward the future. Let's move toward the future. Let's try to get 2021 to be a better year, a banner year. You know, I'm reminded of the old television show MASH, and there was a episode that they had, and you can actually look it up. I'm sure it's online somewhere or whatever, but they had an episode where it basically took them through the 2 or 3 years that they were there, and it was on New Year's Eve each successive year. I believe it was like 3 years in a row. And one of the things that Colonel Potter, one of the characters on the show, basically said is he always said, let's hope that this next coming up year was a damn sight better than the year that had just passed. And I'll be completely honest with you. I have a feeling that we, especially as Americans, we have a luxury that a lot of people don't. We've lived in the course of 20 or 30 or 40 years. There's some people that are alive in the millennial generation that don't even remember the Cold War. Now, I remember the tail end of it because I'm Generation X, but we haven't had like a huge conflict or a huge situation where you had to really and truly be concerned about what was going on within your daily life. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we deal with on a regular basis that we look at in the news media has all been stuff that we we don't necessarily have to pay attention to. I mean, case in point, when it comes to things like voting, I mean, I talked to several young people, in the past, and I mean younger than me, and I would ask them, what are your thoughts on voting? And half of them are like, well, it's whatever. And unfortunately, a lot of people, I think that there are certain things that don't make a difference. And in the grand scheme of things, they probably don't. There's a lot of policies and things like that you don't see what effect they are having necessarily towards you. But at the same time, though, they still are affecting you. And so maybe make 2021 the year where you start getting a little bit more involved, whether it's politics, whether it's, donating your time, donating more money, things that, you have wanted to do, but haven't done in the past because you kind of like, I'll take care of it later, or I'm too busy, or you know what, I really don't feel like it now. Because up until the point that we hit this pandemic, up until the point that we hit this situation where we started to see that our world is actually pretty fragile. There are things that in my life I've looked at and I've been like, holy crap. If I had been paying attention and if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that, I mean, oh my gosh, how much further along could I have been had I not realistically procrastinated on it? So let's make 2021 the year of anti-procrastination. That's something that I think that I'm going to work on. I'm going to make it a goal to where I am going to try and not procrastinate on certain things. There are some things that I've been wanting to do in the past that I think I'm going to take up. There's some things that I have, again, put off on multiple occasions. And whether or not they're going to bring me joy in the new year, I honestly don't know. But they're a focus of mine, I think. They've been something that's been in the back burner, in the back of my mind for a while. And I want to take them forward. I want to take the opportunity of 2021 to move forward. Now, this also has, a bit of a situation where, I'm looking at like my age, where I'm going to be on my birthday, and the age that I'm going to be. So there is a little bit of, I understand now that I'm kind of on the backhill slope. Okay. So there's certain things that I'm either right at the peak if I'm lucky enough, or I'm on the downhill slide if I'm not quite so lucky to make it the rest of the time. But to be honest with you, having my stepfather pass has kind of made me think a little bit more about my own mortality. And so that's spurring me to do 2021 in a different way, to not go at it as though I have the rest of my life, because I do have the rest of my life, but the rest of my life realistically could be tomorrow, next week, next month, could be 5 years, 10 years down the road. I don't know. And so, certain things that I normally have been a little lax on, I think I'm going to start paying a little bit more attention to. So these are some thoughts that, go through my mind, especially when I'm on New Year's celebration. So I thought I'd bring them to you guys. Anyway, so that's something that I think that all of us should kind of work on. And maybe we'll do it together. I mean, I'll probably bring them up on episodes as we move forward. Let you know kind of how I'm doing or whatever. Whatever works. All right. So, that being said, that's pretty much kind of my thoughts at this point. But I have one final thought for you to go out under. And that is this. We have a bit of a story coming in from our educational contingent, and they basically have sent this over to me. A teacher in a classroom asked her students to go ahead and say or try and call out a 12-letter word in order to spell. One student piped up and says, masturbation. And she looked at him. She goes, hey. She goes, wow, that's a mouthful. To which you got the immediate reply of, no, you're thinking of blowjob. That's it for tonight, folks. Make sure you go and hit the subscribe button, and definitely subscribe, and check out the Whiskey Musings Logo store. Help support the show, and we'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night.